Okay. Well, today is another workaround, but we have enough for what I think will be a recorded class. Stop the recording to save it. Okay, I'm going to leave it on. And for now, I'll leave that there to remind me. I'll bring the map back. We have enough. So, for all of the students who are now watching asynchronously, which is the bulk of the class watching the recordings, we will have a recording. So, excellent, everybody. We can continue. So, let me just make sure that uh, I have explained a little bit what we're going to be doing today, and then we're going to come to the hockey game and some of your great discussion posts. There's some very good discussion posts. And also, I need to talk about what's ahead in terms of assignments and everything else. So, first, before we continue, does anyone have any questions? Is there anything they would like to bring to the class's attention? Uh, Ron, let me just make sure this is good. And it is. So go ahead.
How do you feel that our collective oh, well, there I am.
Yeah.
How would you feel that our collective history of humanity will end?
Will end. Well, I love the big thinking. And the way I will answer that is to bring it back to something you mentioned to me in another class, which I thought was very good. You said, "Is fear evolving?" Or something like that, right?
I asked if fear was an evolutionary trait.
Yeah. I thought that was an excellent question. And I just want to remind you of why he asked that. I think we had that class dealt with the sort of slaves of the gods. I introduced you to that idea from William McNeill, the great world historian, about the idea that when we began to develop our early faith, this predates any religion anywhere long before, that he had determined in his research that when he looked at the very early Sumerian mythology, and Sumer is that ancient area, the first empire in Mesopotamia. It's the collection of city states around Mesopotamia that all collected into an empire called Sumer. And that's where we got the first sort of developments in writing and other important technologies. But he determined that the Sumerians were were worshiping their god kings, and that they had essentially put themselves into a position of slavery because they were afraid. They were really afraid of natural disasters and natural catastrophes, and they felt that their king could save them from that. So they were afraid, and there was so much fear in their societies at that time. And then Ron said something like, "Well, is this fear going to evolve or change or?" And so my answer to your question now would be that I don't know how it's going to end, okay? But I do think that when you look at the overall arc of the human story, particularly if you study the historians and philosophers, Alfred North Whitehead, you will see that there has been a kind of slow sunrise taking place in the human story, that we are getting better, but it's slow. And so my answer would be that as we move forwards, however it's going to end, in that time between now and the end, we're going to get better. But will it end with some kind of nuclear catastrophe? Are we living through a time right now where civilization is being profoundly tested? Are we heading towards a world war right now that could really cause concern? I don't know. But I can tell you that there is this sunrise happening, Ron, according to the good historians. And there has been a lot of progress in spite of how it might feel today. We live longer, we're healthier, we're generally wealthier. There's literacy has been eliminated in many parts of the world where it used to be so non where it used to be such a problem. Look at the rights of women, which are huge in the story of humanity. Human rights, all of these things, Ron, give us hope that there is a thing called progress taking place, but it may not be visible unless you can really stand back and look at the bigger story of what's been happening. Then we can see some important trends. Okay. Um, Finally, I would to answer that, I would say if you want some good data on that, Ron, I would suggest you look at a person named Hans Rosling. He is a Swedish um, data scientist who recently passed, but his son is carrying on with his work, like William McJohn and McNeil, and he has collected an enormous amount of data that he presented in a great television series called The Joy of Statistics in Europe. And he shows that we're getting, there's progress happening if you look at the data, but it's slow. Okay. Speaking of progress, let's talk a little bit of hockey and history. Okay. So, how many of you watched some of the game last night? Excellent. Okay, excellent. How are you feeling today, Nick? Are you? Do you feel a little sort of like something's? This was something different in the hockey story in Canada that happened. Yeah, just turn it. Yeah,
I've never been a massive hockey fan myself,
yeah.
but we put on overtime, and for the first time in a long time, I actually was kind of invested in the game.
Yes.
So it's nice to see Canada take them out, especially with everything going on,
Uh,
with all the tension with our neighbors
Yeah.
to the south, right?
Yeah.
So I was happy to see them win for
Yeah.
sure.
Good. Who else? I'd just like to hear from some of you because I can't assume that you would feel the same way I at 62 feel because there's a lot of history that I can bring to this, including when I was a child watching the great Canada Russia series in 1972 and witnessing the Paul Henderson goal. You know who that goal? Paul Henderson? Okay. So, uh, well, who else? Pass the mic. It's Ethan? Sean, Sean here. Yeah, Sean. You weren't? Okay. Um, fair enough. Well, Ron, let's give the mic to Ron and get Ron's thoughts on this as well. I'm just curious from this generation. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was talking to some friends while it was happening, and when the goal went in, I called it magic on Earth. Um, Made me believe that for a moment, good things could bring people together.
Yeah, that's right.
And then, just went by in a blink, and it's all a memory now,
But good things can bring people together.
I suppose.
Yeah, they can. You know that? I think that's more well put than you might realize. Can I just, for a moment, put this into some historical context for you? And probably I am talking to the international students right now who don't know a lot about Canada and our history. But I'm also talking to younger people who've grown up here in Oshawa and Whitby and Greater Toronto who may not also know the history too. So I'm going to assume as I speak to all of you, a collection of younger people, international students, very diverse, that you know, you may not be that aware of how we view the United States in Canada. It's very much a part of our history here. It's really important that you understand something. Everybody in the world, I don't care what country you come from, has to deal with the United States in one way or another. Arnold Toynbee, one of our important world historians I've quoted, wrote a book called The World and the West, where he also talked about historically the way the world deals with the rest of the world. the West. And the West, Western world, today is largely represented by the United States. It used to be that the West was England and France and those countries I said around Western Europe. But when they came over the conquest and established this new um, civilization here, eventually that grew into the United States of America. And I will tell you about that after the break with, the American Revolution and the Declaration of Independence and all of that. But the United States is special for everybody in one way or another. And the Statue of Liberty has been so important in New York as a beacon of liberty and freedom for others from around the world. We in Canada, as our foreign minister recently said, Melanie Joly in Europe, we're like the canary in the coal mine right now. It's an expression. We're the ones who are closest to the United States. We've had to live with them through the duration of our history. We grew out of the United States here to some extent. We are a result of the American Revolution here, and I can explain how that worked. So there's no other country in the world that understands what it's like to live next to the United or to live close or have to deal with the United States. When a foreign minister says we're like the canary in the coal mine, that is an expression we use when there is a kind of problem and somebody is warning the rest of the world of the problem. It's like the canary chirping in this coal mine. It's warning everybody else that something's going on. Well, that's what we're doing right now in Canada. We are warning. We know what it's like. I woke up today with some extraordinary news that you need to know about. Not making this up. I promise you, you can check this. I was going to read you the whole article that appeared in the Washington Post today. A special exclusive. You can see it, but I can tell you because it just take too long. The essence of the American Constitution that was created when the United States was formed was that the president would only be allowed to sit for 2 terms, 8 years. That was supposed to be sacrosanct. No president ever has even suggested that they should have their term extended, that they should be allowed to run for another term. Donald Trump has said that. He wants to test the Constitution. He wants to do exactly what Vladimir Putin has done in Russia and what Xi Jinping has done in China. He wants to be an emperor. We know that. And so for us to have a hockey game in which he had called the American team that morning when they were practicing, and he said, "Go for it, guys. Go stick it to Governor Trudeau." And it's all supposed to be funny. It's not funny. He means it. For us to then go to Boston, to take a game all the way into overtime and score this beautiful goal and stick it to them and say, in the strongest possible terms, "No, we beat you. You don't beat us. This is our game, not your game. And Mr. Trump, get ready. Because if we have to, and we get invaded, and you decide that you want to do what Vladimir Putin did with Ukraine, which is invade with 150,000 people, we will do exactly what President Zelensky did in Ukraine, and we will push back. We will push back in the way we did in the War of 1812, when the Americans then, fresh from their new nation, thought they could just walk into Canada and take Canada. And they didn't. They got pushed back. The indigenous peoples of the United States sided with us in Canada Chief Tecumseh, a great indigenous hero. And we burned the White House in Washington. So, what that meant last night for a Canadian of my generation was, you want to push us around your best friend? You want to threaten us? We might laugh with you. If you want to be the emperor of the world, Donald Trump, get ready. We know how to deal with you. We will fight you head on. That's exactly how I felt last night. I was so proud. So proud. And maybe it's a little overreaction, but it's a deep feeling of huge insecurity we have in Canada about the United States. And we've always been such a good friend. And now they are saying, no, you should just be part of us and we can do it. We will strangle you economically if we have to. And if you're still standing, we'll come in with our troops if we have to. That hasn't been said yet, but it might. To wake up to the news today in the Washington Post that Donald Trump is speaking to his supporters and saying, well, what if I run for another term and, we'll change the Constitution? He's saying this. And his supporters are clapping. So I just can't tell you how proud I am of what happened. And I just wanted you to be aware that we are living through this moment where you need to think hard about your Canadianness and what it means to be a Canadian. Okay. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say about this? And you can disagree with me. You can ask me any kind of question. But one thing you expect of me as a good professor is I'm going to try and tell you very straight with the best information, and I'm going to be real. And I'm going to treat you like grown-ups, like equals. Ron, go ahead.
I found that what you said was quite prescient regarding Donald Trump, because I've been a sad witness to his political career and how it's manifested in the ills of American society that we're able to observe. Um, but as far as Ukraine holding up to Russia at the moment, um, this is due to American influence, obviously, but
Hmm.
I do not believe that Ukraine will be able to stand against Russian military aggression for long, which is unfortunate. Um, I'm not sure about Canada's militaristic might as it compares to America's. I've never subscribed to the military industrial complex in general or believe that war is a viable solution to solve any of the
Yes.
world's problems. In fact, it causes most of the world's problems. Um, yeah, all this ruminating has made me quite weary and cynical of the human condition. Um, and I would like to believe that we're better than all of this, but I fundamentally don't believe that at the moment.
Well, let's there we go. Trump raises idea of running for an unconstitutional third term. I just want to make sure you know this, okay? Because this is momentous. I hope that as we have a class today and we talk, that the cynicism and bleariness that you might feel will be replaced with a sense of something more encouraging and even optimism. And the reason I say that, Ron, is not because I want to sugarcoat and treat you like a child and say, little Ron, it's all going to be okay. It's more that I truly believe that the more you can talk about the most difficult things, actually have a conversation, even if it's depressing and sad, even if it's like really awful, you've talked about it. You've brought human reason, you've brought human intelligence to this. You've brought words around it, and you can start to kind of understand it. And that is, for me, a sign of human. Um, power, something that we can solve problems together. If we're able to just get over the fear of talking about them. And in the talking about them, the conversation has to be intelligent. I'm not talking about, X or whatever Elon Musk is calling his little, platform now where he has his chance to tell the world what to do. If ever there was a fascist developing, it's Elon Musk. Take a look at him and how he bought himself into power. Non elected, $277 million he spent on getting Donald Trump elected. Anyways, let's just have an intelligent class, an intelligent conversation. And by the end of it, Ron, even if it's awful what we're talking about, and it can get awful in human history, you can walk out of here going, yeah, okay, we talked about it and we kind of understand this, this continuing warfare. We kind of understand the suffering that humans inflict on each other for the sake of religious dominance or political dominance. I'm understanding it more, and I think by understanding it, I can start to change it. The best I can say. So I'm going to leave that headline up there, by the way, and I also want to remind you of something else here in the Washington Post. This line has been their masthead line for some time since Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. Democracy dies in darkness. That line is a little bit ironic now because Jeff Bezos, I'm not sure, really believes in democracy much anymore. Jeff Bezos is the creator and CEO of Amazon. He's one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. During Donald Trump's inauguration, let's not forget who was standing right beside him. Do you want me to remind you? It wasn't just Elon Musk. Who was the little bald guy? Me? No. Jeff Bezos has less hair than I do. I'm sure if I shaved it. Jeff Bezos. And let's not forget that not a few days after Donald Trump began his second term, the Amazon workers in Quebec, I think about 4,000 workers were fired in their plants. So I said to my wife after this second term began, I'm wondering if that's going to stay up there on Jeff Bezos's newspaper, Democracy Dies in Darkness, because he's one of the individuals who seems to be maybe challenging the idea of democracy now by supporting an American emerging tyrant. Tyranny is something we're going to talk more about, but let's stop, okay, and come back to the story. So today, what I'd like to do is first, before I tell you more about what happened after the Great Plague decimated the Athenian forces, and Pericles himself, the great statesman of Athens, died from the plague, and Athens was eventually defeated by Sparta, and democracy died. Democracy died in Athens. It died in disease, it died in many things, but let's also remember a fact from history. Okay? The golden age of Athens, as we often say in history, was really just a 200-year period in which the idea of democracy was created for humanity. And there were philosophers and others who promoted it. But eventually, it was defeated. It was replaced with the Spartan government. Sparta defeated Athens, and Sparta, as you know, was a much more militaristic, a much more harsh government. It was not a democracy. And in a moment, after I review with you some of your discussion posts, to prove to you what happened and how it speaks to the moment we are in today, which is when we see democracy being threatened. In 399 BC, an extraordinary event took place in Athens with the suicide of Socrates. And we are lucky to have an eyewitness account pretty well of those moments when Socrates was faced with the choice. And I'm going to talk about that in a moment. You're going to hear a firsthand account of a human being in the human story who was presented with a stark choice. He was given the chance to say that his free thinking and what it had led to was too dangerous, was false, and he would have to renounce his views. And if he was unprepared to do that, he would have to drink the hemlock and kill himself. And he chose to kill himself. So you're going to hear from me reading at that moment, 2,400 years ago, when a human being chose to give his life for the cause of freedom. It's going to leave you with a question as you go from the class today of what are you prepared to do? If you see that your society is somehow threatened, if you see that your world around you is changing in a way that's dark, you don't like it, you think your freedom is being taken away from you, what are you going to do? I'm going to let that sit with you later today, okay? I'm not even going to ask you to answer that. It's such a hard question. I don't want to put more pressure on all of you. But what I do want you to do today is think a lot about how democracy, how we awaken to this power, can slip away from us if we're not careful. It has in the past, and it could again. Okay, so again, to repeat, when we talk about difficult things, we're talking about them. It should, I hope, inspire you that we can talk about anything. But these are difficult questions, really difficult questions. Democracy dies in darkness? Does it? We'll see. Okay, so let's go to some of the discussion posts before we continue. And is there anything you'd like to ask before I just do a little bit of a review with you and read out loud some interesting discussion posts? And also give you a little bit of information about what's coming. Just raise a hand, okay, if there's anything you'd like to say. But let's come back to this. Here's something. This is my favorite part of the class, when I can read out loud things that you've written. I take seriously the idea that you are here to learn. And the only way I can assess whether you're learning is when I see what you're writing. I don't believe in exams and tests and all those things. They're okay, but that doesn't really demonstrate to me. Are you actually processing the big ideas that we're talking about? Do you care about them? So when I look at your discussion posts, and particularly your first reflections, that really gives me a good idea of what's happening in your head in this class. And I like what I'm seeing a lot in the assignments and the discussion posts. Way to go. I have good news for you today. There is no discussion post at all. Next week is break. Okay, so everyone's getting 3 out of 3 today, including in the Cosmos and including all the students out there who don't do anything. You're all getting 3 out of 3, but you're gonna fail anyways because you're not handing in anything else. So it doesn't matter if you get 3 out of 3. You're still gonna fail. And you know who you are. I'm in touch with some of you already. But anybody who's here in person, particularly the ones coming week after week, none of you are going to fail. Quite the opposite. So let's take a look at what Gurtej Singh wrote. This is a student. He's not here, Gurtej? No? Okay. Singh, he's out there in the cosmos, and he's watching the recordings, and here's what he said. He got a good 3 out of 3 for this. How can questioning and pursuing information benefit both individuals and societies? Can you give an example, either historical or present, of how this resulted in meaningful change? The course was deeply illuminating as it explored the notion of individuals becoming aware of their inner power, expressed in terms of agency, autonomy, empirical observation, and enlightenment. I'm going to stop for a second, okay, and just say something. I love this discussion post, but I even have some questions of, is the hand of AI in this? I don't know yet. And the reason is because it's so well written. But let me just go on, okay? Because the content is very important. So I'm giving the student the benefit of the doubt, okay? But I go through this process all the time with everybody's work now. Is this really a student talking to me or a machine? But the ideas here are very good, okay? So I'm going to just give Gurtej the benefit of the doubt. Say, he wrote this, okay? We examine how ancient cultures relied on mythology as a means to explain their surroundings before moving on to analytical thinking and scientific method. It was fascinating to watch the development of cultures as they questioned existing dogma and sought out new kinds of knowledge. One of the primary topics of discussion was the great historical changes wrought by intellectual enlightenment. To illustrate, Darwin's description of natural selection drastically altered our knowledge of evolution as well as human advancement. Similarly, the invention of written records, as amply demonstrated in the works of Thucydides, highlighted the necessity to record history according to provable facts and not mythological narrations. A further key insight I gained from the discussion was the role played by independent thinking in the shaping of societies. In the classroom discussion, I gained the insight that power is not merely political rule. It includes the pursuit of knowledge and the ability to arrive at informed decisions. This history lesson taught me that education is a form of power enabling individuals to challenge established facts, practice independent thinking, and effect change. In sum, the course greatly enhanced my knowledge about how intellectual development has broadly contributed to the development of human civilization and continues impacting our modern world. Really well done. Answers the question, refer to what we did. I'm going to say that this is authentic. Excellent, Gurtej. In my conversations with students privately and my emails, when I've challenged them about AI, what they're saying to me, particularly the international students, is they're going to Grammarly and they're using Grammarly just to replace words, as synonyms. Synonyms. I'm working with them to make sure that they're not using whole sentences from Grammarly, whole paragraphs. So I'm assuming this is credible, Gurtej, and it's good. But this is the time we live in. Your professor has to be such a good critical thinker to make sure that every student, whenever a student hands in anything he's written, is not cheating. Because cheating is a click away. Just a click. So is a bomb. So is your husband or wife on a dating site. So is sex, if you want it. It's all a click away now. This is not good, but it can be good. but it's not good if you abuse it. Okay? Do you know what I'm talking about? Go on, Ron. Tell me. Tell us. What's that? Music student, and also he writes, right? You write. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Try to, anyways. Yeah, Give Me Shelter by the Rolling Stones. Love, Children is just a shot away.
Just a shot.
Sports, yeah, because I believe they're reading about the Archduke Ferdinand or something and how that led to the
The
First
First
War.
World War.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. It all just came out of one bullet, really. A
So what is the
plethora of
gimme shelter? What does gimme shelter mean then? Like in terms of how you would look at it? Does it speak to our times somehow? We want shelter from.
a universal. I can't speak today. A universality, not just contained in the '60s, even though it was a product of that. I think it applies to even our current age, based on the dichotomy that you're speaking of.
Well, think about it. It's. But anytime you bring up Rolling Stones, it's now there. Mick Jagger is a product of progress. How old is he? Too old. He's still performing. He's in his 80s. It's called medical science. It might even be called blood transfusions, although that we don't know if that's true. It is true. Okay, he's got new blood. Okay, so let me go to one final thing, and then we're gonna move on. Okay, here's something else. Let's come back to the question that Albert had because we've got some. These are all the. Okay, Albert, what was your question again? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So in a previous class, we were talking about like Abraham had this like he just got to know like there's only one God.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
So that was my question. Like how what was the main purpose? Why he thought there's only one God? Why not like
I wanted to answer that for you because it was a great question. Why? How did he come to that? Um, because we had before Abraham, whether Abraham existed or not, the idea of monotheism entered the story. Okay, why? Well, I mentioned last week, and it may not have um, been clear enough, Albert, that there's something in all of us that thinks and feels a higher power in us. But then I kind of talked about, well, maybe a Hindu or a Buddhist or others who believe in multiple gods may not feel that. So let me just check and make sure that I was correct. And I'm going to go to an Indian student from India right now to make sure. So, all Indian students, raise your hands, including Sikh, okay, who are from India. Okay, got a lot. Okay, it's good. Okay, so we'll go to Piyush because Piyush always is ready to jump in. Piyush, do you ever feel somehow have ever felt inside of you that there's this larger force, God, but it's just this one force that is responsible for everything on earth, and it's omnipotent, it's all powerful, it's the giver of life. Have you ever felt that?
Maybe sometimes, because when you like facing some challenges in your life, so that time you definitely like,
Are you a Hindu?
yeah. But I believe all like I respect all the religion. Like
So when you were in that moment of challenge, why didn't you think of a Hindu god of why this something bigger than that?
I literally don't know about it, but it's come in mind. Sometimes it's in mind. Like you are following your Hindu, like Christians and the Buddhism, because I went all the things like in India. Every year I went all the places, like in
Yes.
the Buddhist culture, like the dargahs, like churches in Osho as well. I visited sometimes the church as well for the prayers.
So you
Yeah.
feel You know what he's feeling? What Abraham felt. It's the call. You feel a call. Something is calling you, speaking to you, that's out there, but you don't know. It's
Just like the goat's aura, you
it's
can say the vibes and the aura. You can say
the vibes and
aura.
overall, exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see. There's an Indian Hindu, and that's not a monotheistic. That's not Judaism, Christianity, Islam. Okay, but let's go over here for a second and see. Let's get the female voice. Okay, go ahead. Okay, do you understand what Piyush just said? Do you want me to explain a bit, or hold it like karaoke? What's your name? Mu- Oh, you're Muskan. Okay, Muskan. Good. Okay. Do you feel okay taking the microphone now? Do you want me to move it around somewhere else? Because I think you have something you could say. I remember you came and spoke to me after one class, and you had some real interest. So
I can try maybe.
good. Okay. See, there's fear right now, but overcoming, because behind the fear is intelligence. All we have to do is just smash the fear. Now we get intelligence. Okay, Muskan, have you ever felt a kind of a presence of a bigger power that's sort of looking over the world and the planet and all of humans, and that sort of like it's just you don't know what it is, but it's there. It's something spiritual.
Yeah.
Are you a Hindu?
No, I'm a smiley.
Oh, that's right. She is. Could you explain your faith? Her Aga Khan recently just passed away. She can. Could you tell the rest of the class what your faith is?
I'm an Ismaili Muslim.
Ismaili Muslim.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we are a community. We believe in a living God.
Hold this closer.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
We believe in a living God.
Yes. Go ahead. Yep. I'll raise this. Yeah. You believe in a living God?
Yeah, we believe in a living God. He guides us, protects us. He he has a lineage passing from his son, from father to son, and then it continues.
Yes.
And then he knows everything basically. We believe in him, and then it's just that he has the light of Allah in himself.
Yes. Allah is God.
Yeah,
Allah is
Allah.
God. So,
Yeah.
so you're a Muslim. You're a Muslim. So that is a monotheistic faith. Do you understand the point I'm getting at here, which is we all have a part of us that feels this something, and it doesn't matter who we are and where we come from? And often that part we really feel when we're suffering the most. Walk into a prison and you will see many born again people. Ask yourself next time, when you've unplugged your machine, your head is not being filled with the virtual world. You're real, absolutely real. See, the stuff in your machine is not real. It's an extension, but it's not flesh and blood. So when you put that machine aside and you just get quiet, and you're not being stimulated by anybody or anything, you just get quiet. Or you go for a walk in the forest and you start thinking about how much pain you're in. Like everything is, you're suffering. It's at that moment you will feel the call. You will feel it deeply when you suffer. It's a very, very deep thing in the human being. I have felt it profoundly, profoundly. And in it, I felt tremendous love for humanity. And I would never have felt that unless at that moment of deep suffering, I thought everything was slipping away from me. Everything was going. Everything. And if I could just hold on. And in that holding on, I will never forget sitting on a bench in Barcelona, Spain, where I was living for an extended period of time on La Ramblas, which is the great avenue, the great boulevard of Barcelona. No money, wasn't working, things weren't going well. I was away from home, far away from home, international students, far away from home. Where do I belong? Who's going to take care of me? How am I going to survive? I can't reach for money from mommy or daddy. I don't have a father. And mommy is working hard. So I then felt pretty bad. And then on top of that, it got even worse. I won't go into it. But I felt a call. Like, you stay in this life. You stay right here. There's a way of living that no matter how bad it gets, there's something or somebody that cares for you, that loves you, that wants you to be here. And you are all connected to everybody else. And they all feel that too. All the people walking on that boulevard are feeling it in some way or another. It's the human bond. That is, in some ways, what Abraham was being called by, was feeling. And other prophets, religious prophets, have felt that. And Albert, that is the thing in us. It's something. That's what Abraham was being called by. Does that make sense? So let's move on and let's come back to our story. And I will bring in, I'll leave that here for now. Is there anything you want to say and ask about before I briefly continue? Because I would like to have you get up and do some notes together, but I think given the way things are going, it might be another one of those classes where we should just break for 5 minutes and then come back and finish off, okay? I have a video I want to show you, and we're going to talk about the end of Greece, the beginning of Rome, and the coming of the new god kings, and we're going to start moving towards the conquest slowly. Okay? 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Yes? Oh, let me just shut this so we have you.
important readings from beneath the pyramid. They discovered the tomb itself. Seen here as a clearly defined area in blue. A space hermetically sealed for 2,000 years. It measured as big as a football pitch. Although at first the pyramid appeared to be a closed structure covering the tomb, the roof of the tomb was in fact exposed to the sky. Or at least it had been originally, before it was buried beneath thousands of tons of earth. The Waddington team has been probing the tomb mounds for almost a decade, tracing the shape of the pyramid beneath their feet with a series of over 4,000 core samples. And each one, Regal realized, could potentially hold an incredible piece of evidence direct from the tomb itself. Because if there was ever mercury there, over the centuries, mercury vapor might seep through the roof of the tomb and into the surrounding soil, where Regal hoped they may be able to detect it.
Samples of this sort enable us to see the supporting structure, the rambler structure that's supporting the entire mound. But of course, what really interests us is what is the burial like. So, if the legend about the emperor having placed in the base of his tomb a map of all of China, of all of his empire, with rivers of flowing mercury, if that legend is true, then we can expect that the test of this soil will tell us whether or not it's true. It will either provide us with corroboration or won't.
The Chinese archaeologists have no immediate plans to excavate the tomb. They have no way yet to preserve its contents, and no desire to disturb the emperor's spirit.
No desire to disturb the emperor's spirit. Well, let's finish up for today. You were just watching a docudrama about Shi Huangdi, who is considered the uniter of China from a series of wars that had been taking place around 4,000 years ago in ancient China. He, through his military genius and extreme cruelty, and his desire to eliminate all historical evidence of any other culture that challenged his rule, he eventually established himself as the overlord, the first emperor of a united China, the first emperor in the human story. The idea of the emperor is something that is so important for you to understand because it tells us that in spite of our desire to fight for something new, we are very vulnerable to this idea of a divine human being, a God King. I want to just finish with the story today with a reading and help you to understand a little bit about what is happening in the story. And I'm trying to consolidate quite a bit of information into a short period of time, but let's just do it by looking at the map for a second, okay? And does anyone have any questions? Are you good? Okay. So let's try and remember that the story that we've been looking at has been at around 2,400 years ago or so. We've been in that period around what's called the Peloponnese or Greece, the peninsula of Greece. And And I want to just make sure this is clear to all of you. The Mediterranean Sea is our essential location for where so much of the story has been taking place. Okay, but let me just come back. So here we have, you see the little, I'm going to use this to direct. Can you see the cursor here going? Okay, good. So here is Greece. And that's called the Peloponnese, and that's where ancient Athens, with many city-states, established this new way of thinking that led to democracy. What happened is, as we start to continue on from 2,300, 2,200, and we're moving towards the coming of Jesus and the beginning of Christianity, we'll get there. But what's important is that Athens, even though it won a great war against its enemy, the Persians, who occupied what's now Turkey, the Persian Empire, that's where Persia had established an immense empire that stretched all across and into the Eastern world. In spite of the victory that the Athenians had had against the Persians when they came into Greece, and Athens and Sparta fought together to defeat the Persians, after that victory, the Spartans and the Athenians, the two great cities of Greece, became enemies again. It's kind of like during the Second World War. The Soviet Union and the Western world, they fought together to defeat Hitler. Stalin, who was the great dictator of the Soviet Union, was allied with Churchill and the American president. But then after the war, when Hitler was defeated, eventually the Soviet Union became the enemy of its ally. This happens. And this is exactly what happened in Greece with Sparta and Athens. Eventually, Sparta, which was a culture that did not believe in democracy at all, occupied Athens. And Athens, being so weak from a plague that had decimated many of its soldiers, including Pericles, set up a new government there that was not democratic at all. We might call it an oligarchy, rule of a very few men. At that time, when democracy now was being profoundly threatened, Socrates, the great philosopher of the Athenian world, whom you met in the previous class, who would be some... Just a second. Just want to make sure. I think it's something to do with the cord, but hold on. Here we go. We're going to do our workaround. Okay. Anything? I've got it. Socrates was arrested. Now, in a moment, I'm going to read you something about this moment when he is told by the new rulers of Athens, the Spartans, that he will have to make a decision or kill himself. I want to reestablish something for all of you so you understand something about the times we're living in right now. The next chapter of the story after Awakenings of Power is called Spells of Our God Kings. And what you're going to learn in that chapter, and I'll get to it in more detail after the break, but at least I can touch on it now, is that such is the power and our need to believe in a divine presence on earth, not a God up there, but a God in our own people, that the Chinese, who had no contact with the Greek world, also had their own God King that they established. And that God King became an emperor. The word emperor, when we talk about an emperor, Julius Caesar, the emperor, Napoleon, an emperor, Charlemagne, an emperor, or when, the Brazilian president today says Donald Trump, wants to be the emperor of the world. That's what the current Brazilian president just said yesterday. Donald Trump wants to be the emperor of the world. So where does emperor come from? Actually, it comes from China. And what you were watching there was the necropolis, or the burial place of the first emperor of China, Shi Huangdi, who united China and created the Chinese empire that has become so important in human history. And you were looking at his burial place, which dwarfs by a long shot any of the pyramids that you saw briefly in Egypt, where King Ramses, for example, had been buried, and other pharaohs. The idea of an emperor was so deeply fixed in the Chinese way of looking at things that when this emperor was buried, as you saw there, in this city that was built underground for him, he took with him close to 10,000 sculptures. They're called the Terracotta Warriors. Some of you may know of the Terracotta Warriors. Well, those were built during Shi Huangdi's lifetime so that he could take his army to his grave with him and protect him in the afterlife. And each of those terracotta warriors made of terracotta was made based on a real soldier. They're life size, 6 feet, 5'10", 5'9". There would have been soldiers during Shi Huangzi's time who would model themselves, stand there while a sculptor prepared a terracotta image of him. 2 questions, and then I'll come back to Socrates. The spell of the God King is so great that I decided that in the story that I wanted to tell you, I had to dedicate an entire chapter to this, and I would call it the spell of the God King. You're going to see this happen with Alexander the Great, with his father Philip. You're going to see it happen with other leaders in history in Africa and the Americas, with the great Inca God King Atahualpa. So I want you to understand that when I say spell of a God King, I mean spell in more than one way. Spell means a stretch of time, a spell of time. Spell also means you're under a trance. In the human story, we have a problem. We humans have found ourselves, in spite of wanting more freedom, we keep defaulting to the God King. And we just might be doing it again with the United States. That's a bit of a stretch. Donald Trump is not a warrior. He might pretend to be. He's a great communicator and marketer, but he avoided the Vietnam War when he was supposed to fight. As an American, he got out of it by saying he had an injury. So you won't hear about that, but it's true. Check the history. He dodged the draft. Shi Huangdi, Alexander, Julius Caesar, and many of the other god kings and emperors I'm going to tell you about, they were tremendous military geniuses, very smart on the battlefield. The only battlefield Donald Trump knows is a television show called The Apprentice, where he just tells people you're going to be fired, and he sits in a boardroom with a camera on him. Anyways, Socrates understood this danger. He lived through a time in Greece when its democratic experiment was being replaced by an autocracy or oligarchy, which is the Spartans had come in and were installing a much more brutal system. And his choice was clear. Let me read you something, and then we're going to end the class today. Okay? Socrates never wrote anything. He did a lot of talking and questioning and, of course, innovated the idea of the Socratic method of questioning, which is you constantly question people to get to exactly what they're trying to say, to get to the real information. He is constantly displaying his critical thinking, forcing people to answer difficult questions. The authorities, the new Spartan authorities, did not like that kind of questioning. He had many students. One of them was Plato, another great philosopher. And Plato's student was Aristotle. You've heard of all of these names. Eventually, Aristotle is going to teach Alexander the Great a lot about how to think about power. That's coming later. When Socrates was put in prison, he was told that he would have to go on trial and defend himself for his subversive views against the Spartan authorities. Plato, his student, was so distraught by this that he was unable to go and visit Socrates for very long in prison. Other students of Socrates did, and eventually they wrote about this and what they witnessed firsthand. And eventually Plato then wrote an account of this moment when Socrates decided that he didn't want to answer any more questions from the Spartan authorities, and that he was prepared to give his life for this cause that if you are being forced by a higher authority to renounce your free thinking, if you're being forced to say something you believe is wrong, if you're being forced to deny what you know is true, if you're being forced not to think freely anymore, but to think only what the government wants, he decided he would rather leave this world. So listen to how he went to his death. It's a remarkable account. 399 BC, one of the most important deaths, most important events in the human story, when what we call the world's great philosopher decided he doesn't want to be living in this world that is so corrupt any longer. So we waited. This is his student writing. I need to get my glasses, and this should inspire all of us. So we waited, discussing and reviewing what had been said, or else dwelling upon the greatness of the calamity which had befallen us. His students are very, very upset that their teacher is about to kill himself, and they are going to be providing the hemlock to him to take and drink. We felt just as though we were losing a father and should be orphans for the rest of our lives. Meanwhile, when Socrates had taken his bath, his children were brought to see him. He had 2 little sons and 1 big boy, and the women of his household, they arrived. He talked to them and gave them directions about carrying out his wishes. Then he told the women and children to go away, and he came back to us. Let me just take 2 minutes, and then I'll let you go. It was now nearly sunset. He came and sat down fresh from the bath, and he'd only been talking for a few minutes when the prison officer came in and walked up to him and said, "Socrates, I shall not have to find any fault with you, as I do with the others that we have to condemn to death, for getting angry with me and cursing when I tell them to drink the poison, when I tell them that I have to carry out the government orders. I have come to know during this time that you are the noblest and the gentlest and the bravest of all men that have ever come here. And now, especially when I am sure that you're not angry with me, but with them, the government, because you know they are responsible for what I am about to do. I have to follow orders. So now, Socrates, goodbye, and try to bear what must be as easily as you can. And as he went away, he burst into tears. We don't know if this is completely true, if the prison officer burst into tears. This is what Plato's writing. But imagine that. Socrates looked up to him and said, "Goodbye to you too. We will do as you say." Then, addressing us, he went on. This is a man who's about to die. What a charming person. All the time I have been there, he has visited me and sometimes had discussions with me and shown me the greatest kindness. And how generous of him now to shed tears for me at parting. But come, let us do as he says. Someone had better bring in the poison if it is ready prepared. And if it is not prepared, tell them to prepare it. 400 years later, guess who else is going to go to his death with the same kind of humility? Jesus. Anyways, have a great break, okay? I'll see you in 2 weeks.